Colonel Don Dickinson, one of our military guests, had a very heavy hand in training the commanders who are off the Haitian waters right now. Colonel Dickinson, let's talk about invasion scenarios.
Okay, Bernie, I want to emphasize this is just one of many possibilities, and this is where the tactical surprise can come in. If we take a look at Haiti in general, we see an extremely rugged country. Now, that extremely rugged country extends right down to the beach. So a conventional landing, like you might think of the coverage of the D-Day and Normandy landings, so where people go in over the beach, probably wouldn't be too easy. So now we have these aircraft carriers, which has been pointed out in a unique role, carrying in troops using helicopters. So the helicopters can move over the beach without regard to any difficulty there or any ruggedness of the terrain, and move directly in what's called a vertical envelopment of various targets. Now, when we start to look at the possible targets, again, this is just a sample of the kinds of things that in any operation such as this, a force would want to hit. You want to go for their command and control, their government centers, places of communication. The U.S. Embassy, obviously, for example, is not a target, but it's an area we want to secure to prevent any damage or endangerment to American nationals there. The sports stadium could be a useful place for logistical operations to be conducted. Now, that arrow goes in there and makes it look like that the forces will come in and hit them one at a time. Actually, most of the targets hit will be hit simultaneously. In fact, there's a whole other set of targets that we'll see coming up here, such as airfields, barracks, and those types of logistical and troop concentration facilities. And those targets are absolutely critical for follow-on forces to be brought in so that we continue to pile on and gain that overwhelming preponderance of force that makes a situation where the Haitian forces realize they have to give up.
Colonel Nightingale, do you see anything wrong with this plan based on your experience in Panama? After all, in live combat operations, things do get screwed up and people do make mistakes.
Right. Well, Murphy is always alive and well. The plan is as good as until the first bullet is shot. But in terms of the general concept, it's absolutely a right thing. You've got to hit everything at the same time, if at all possible. There's undoubtedly going to be confusion. There will be fires. There will be changes from what was originally anticipated. But there's a lot of built-in what-if drills they've gone through, and they're going to do the best that they can to adjust and shift as necessary. But the key is that everything that needs to be controlled as the government will be taken down probably within the first 30 minutes.
20,000 troops. Colonel Sam Gardner, I understand that some American allies over in Europe are snickering at the Americans in this overwhelming use of planned force.
Well, it is overwhelming, Bernie, and maybe a little too it makes me a little nervous to see the United States military puts us in a position where really saying that we need 20,000 people. This is a military that's probably not much bigger, has not much more firepower than maybe some of the gangs in Los Angeles.
But we need to be careful about when we talk about 20,000 people being applied. We're not going to apply 20,000 people to these precise targets and issues that Don described. The vast majority of those people will be brought in later to control the countryside.
Let's look at the alternative here, too. When we talk about overwhelming force, some people say, well, you're using an anvil to stomp on a fly. Well, I'll tell you what, if they do not use overwhelming force, if the alternative is to try to precisely match the forces, then what occurs is there's a fight. And a fight is bad for both sides. And if the U.S. forces underestimate and go in with less forces than are necessary, then it's a big fight. And lots more people get hurt on both sides. So anybody that's snickering at the application of overwhelming force just doesn't understand much about modern warfare.
That's exactly what happened to us in Grenada when we came in with a penny packet and then had to rapidly reinforce in essentially an unprogrammed manner to make the difference.
Let me tell you what worries me, Don and Keith. I have a feeling that since the Vietnam War, the American military leadership has set some criteria for the use of military force. And that is, we got to have a clear-cut objective, we got to know when we're going to get out, we got to have overwhelming force, you know what the litany is, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I have a feeling that the American military, in fact, is dictating foreign policy by the limits it's putting on the use of itself. In fact, it's got the country talking in that way. You know, we don't do things unless we know when we're going to get out.
Well,
I mean, in the history of warfare, the military saying, tell me when we're going to get out before I get into war is not something we do. The Los Angeles Police Department doesn't say in the morning, tell me when I'm going to get out of Los Angeles or I'm not going to go in.
Well, I think the issue really is presenting the president and the civilian policymakers with the conditions for success. The military can go in anywhere with anything they're told to, but what the military is really paid to do is advise the national policymakers on the best way to go in. And through experience, they've learned the best way to go in is with a whole toolbox.
Gentlemen, let's pick up on this when we come back from this break, because what you're doing is sharing with us an obvious division among the military leaders as to which way to go. And I'm going to ask you, Colonel Gardner, since you mentioned that it seems like the military is running United States foreign policy in this instance, and maybe a few others, whether or not you're indirectly criticizing a man who's down there as part of the American delegation, former chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, General Colin Powell. We'll put that question to you when we come back with our continuing live coverage of the showdown in Haiti.